to a front office sports article. I'm actually shocked, to be honest, that this was written as pro player as that media outlet tends to be, and Annie Constable. But it is a scathing peel back the curtain report where we have found out.
Sold out is one of the most powerful phrases in sports marketing. It implies demand, momentum, and cultural relevance. Unrivaled leaned into that phrase aggressively during its inaugural season, proudly announcing that it had filled a venue in Miami. Headlines echoed the claim. Social media celebrated it. The league presented it as proof of concept. But numbers without context are meaningless. The venue held 870 people. That detail was conveniently omitted from most coverage. The word sold out was allowed to do the heavy lifting, creating the illusion of success without scrutiny. In reality, filling 870 seats does not demonstrate mass appeal. It demonstrates that a niche product found a niche audience. That is not inherently bad, but it is nowhere near enough to support the grand claims Unrivaled was making. The more important question was never whether curiosity could fill a small room once. The real question was whether sustained interest existed. Could the league survive once novelty wore off? Could it attract repeat viewers? Could it expand beyond its core supporters? Those questions were largely ignored, because asking them would have punctured the narrative. Fast forward to year 2, and those questions have been answered decisively. Front Office Sports reported that after expanding capacity by just 150 seats to an even 1,000, Unrivaled could not fill the venue. That should be deeply alarming. Expansion, even minimal expansion, should coincide with growth, not contraction. The description of the fan fest outside the arena is particularly telling. Journalists described it not as a crowd, but as a collection of supporters. That is coded language. It means the atmosphere lacked energy, density, and excitement. In other words, it looked empty. Inside the arena, the problem was even more visible. Empty sections were noticeable on camera during opening weekend. Not isolated seats. Not late arrivals. Entire areas without fans. That kind of visual is devastating for a league trying to project momentum. Attendance issues alone do not doom a league, but they are an early warning system. They tell you whether a product is gaining traction or losing it. In Unrivaled's case, the signal is unmistakable. Interest is not growing. It is shrinking. And attendance, as bad as it looks, is not the real catastrophe. That comes when you turn on the television.
Its inaugural season, Unrivaled was a spectacle, was it? Question mark? Drawing a sold-out crowd of 870 eager eyes. 870. In year 2, the sparkle has worn off. Look, when a sports media outlet like Front Office Sports writes what they just did, uh-oh.
Unrivaled's collapse is not just a failure of execution. It is a failure of assumptions. The assumption that dissatisfaction with the WNBA would naturally fuel an alternative. The assumption that player empowerment alone creates demand. The assumption that media enthusiasm equals audience interest. None of those assumptions held. The league was built on ideology before it was built on consumer behavior. It prioritized messaging over market testing. It treated criticism as hostility rather than feedback. And now it is paying the price. This is not a referendum on the talent of the players involved. It is a referendum on the business model. Fans do not owe any league their attention. Attention must be earned every single game. Right now, Unrivaled is not earning it. And that is why the conversation has shifted from excitement to autopsy.
Beyond Miami city limits was quieter during the opening weekend of the 3-on-3 Basketball League's second season. The Fan Fest outside was less of a throng and more like a collection of supporters. Inside the renovated arena, which added roughly 150 seats, bringing capacity from 850 to 1,000 fans, seats were empty. I told you guys. That first day, I flipped it over, and you can see the new seats. There were absolutely empty.
Look closely at the tone surrounding Unrivaled now. This is no longer analysis or healthy skepticism. It feels like a postmortem. The energy has shifted from optimism to resignation, and that shift did not happen randomly. It happened because the numbers finally removed all room for spin. What was once framed as a bold new future for women's basketball has rapidly become one of the most dramatic business collapses the sport has ever seen. Unrivaled was marketed as more than a league. It was positioned as a solution to low salaries, a solution to players needing to go overseas, a solution to power imbalance between leagues and athletes. It was framed as player-first, modern, and revolutionary. Media outlets amplified that narrative aggressively, often without scrutiny, because it aligned with a broader cultural push toward empowerment and disruption. But empowerment without sustainability is just branding. The warning signs were there from the beginning. The 3-on-3 format was sold as innovation, but innovation only matters if fans actually want the product. The league leaned heavily on star power, assuming that name recognition alone would carry viewership. It relied on hype cycles rather than long-term demand. And most importantly, it assumed that dissatisfaction with the WNBA would automatically translate into loyalty toward an alternative product. That assumption has proven disastrously wrong. The reason the current mood feels funereal is because reality has finally caught up. When even supportive media outlets begin publishing pieces that sound less like previews and more like obituaries, it signals a fundamental breakdown. This is no longer about patience or growing pains. It is about structural failure. A league does not collapse this quickly unless the foundation was weak to begin with. Attendance struggles, ratings decline, and visible public disengagement are not isolated problems. They are interconnected symptoms of a product that does not resonate beyond a very small, already invested audience. What makes this collapse especially striking is how confident the messaging was just months ago. Unrivaled was not marketed cautiously. It was marketed as inevitable, as the next phase of women's basketball, as a threat to existing power structures. When expectations are set that high, the fall is brutal. And that is where we are now. The gap between the promise and the performance is so wide that it cannot be ignored. This is not a slow decline. It is a free fall. And the numbers that follow do not soften the blow. They confirm it.
Boy, look, if you are a WNBA player that watches this channel, and by the way, I know you guys do, I would get on the horn to Nike Agumake, and I would say, we're signing the CBA. We're signing the CBA because that footing that you thought was so solid under your feet right now, nah.
If empty seats are concerning, television ratings are existential. Attendance can be masked, spun, or contextualized. Ratings cannot. They are the clearest measure of how many people care enough to watch when they are not physically present. For Unrivaled, the ratings are catastrophic. Opening weekend, January 5th, featured 2 games broadcast across TNT and True TV. Combined, they averaged 175,000 viewers. That number is underwhelming, especially given the promotional push and network backing. But it was at least defensible. It could be framed as a starting point. Then came the True TV exclusive games. 32,000 viewers. That number is not just bad. It is embarrassing. It is the kind of number that raises immediate questions about why airtime is being allocated at all. Many independent YouTube creators routinely surpass that figure with a single upload. This is a professionally produced league, backed by a major network, featuring some of the most recognizable names in women's basketball. And only 32,000 people showed up. The problem did not correct itself. January 9th games averaged 139,000 viewers across TNT and True TV, a decline. January 10th and 11th featured 4 games on True TV averaging just 71,000 viewers. That is not stabilization. That is collapse. These numbers are not simply below expectations. They undermine the entire premise of the league. Unrivaled was positioned as a commercially viable alternative, one that could attract fans, sponsors, and broadcasters. Ratings like these do not attract investment. They repel it. Television partners care about reach. Advertisers care about eyeballs. Sponsors care about association with relevance. When ratings fall to these levels, every stakeholder begins reassessing their commitment. The most damaging part is that this decline happened immediately. There was no gradual drop-off, no slow erosion. Interest evaporated almost as soon as the novelty faded. That suggests the product itself is not compelling enough to sustain attention. This is not a marketing failure. It is a demand failure.
And most concerningly for second-year league, ratings on TNT were lackluster. Unrivaled's opening slate on January 5th averaged 175,000 viewers in 2 games that aired on both TNT and True TV. Listen to this. The 2 True TV exclusive games on January 5th averaged 32,000 viewers. I've got videos this week with more.
Context makes the situation even worse. Last season, Unrivaled averaged 221,000 viewers on TNT. Its peak event, the one-on-one tournament final, drew 377,000 viewers. Those numbers were not spectacular, but they were respectable. They suggested a baseline audience existed. This season, that baseline has collapsed. Year over year, the league has lost nearly half its television audience. That is not supposed to happen in a media environment where viewership metrics are actually being inflated by new measurement systems. In theory, numbers should be easier to grow, not harder. Yet Unrivaled is moving in the opposite direction at alarming speed. This decline cannot be blamed on player recognition. The roster includes Breanna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, Eric Ogunbowale, and other established stars. These are not anonymous athletes. Anyone who considers themselves a women's basketball fan knows exactly who they are. And yet, the broader audience is disengaged. This is the most uncomfortable truth for advocates of the league. Star power alone is not enough. Recognition does not equal demand. Fans may respect these players, but respect does not automatically translate into viewership, especially when the product lacks competitive tension, meaningful stakes, or emotional investment. Unrivaled was supposed to prove that women's basketball interest was independent of any single figure, that the audience would show up regardless. The numbers suggest otherwise. They suggest that casual fans are not buying in and core fans are not expanding. When America collectively shrugs, that is not a marketing issue. It is a signal that the product does not matter to them.